Welcome to our first video lecture. This will be a little bit different. It won't be as long as my lectures are in class normally. Probably limit this to 15 or 20 minutes, maybe less, we'll see. A great advantage this is going to be that you can feel free to pause as you are copying things down in your notes. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. We last talked about Manifest Destiny, and we kind of glossed over some of the politics that were going on while we expanded westward. So we're going to go back and then talk about the politics. At this time, the single largest issue in the world is slavery, and it has come to the forefront of American politics, and has caused tensions to rise and will ultimately lead into the Civil War. So let's start out by going to the election of 1840. It's got some familiar characters. It's going to be William Henry Harrison versus Martin Van Buren. This is the exact same field of candidates that we saw in 1836. This time we have Martin Van Buren as the incumbent and William Henry Harrison as the challenger. Let's start talking about William Henry Harrison. He's going to run as a member of the Whig Party, which is the established anti-Jackson Party, if you'll remember. And he's going to run what we call the log cabin campaign. The whole basis of his campaign is going to be that he was born in a log cabin. He's a frontiersman. He's just like you and me. He would rather sit on his front porch and drink hard cider than be president. But he feels it's his duty to go represent the common man. This sounds familiar, probably. This sounds a lot like what Jackson did. It's kind of ironic that the man who's leading the anti-Jackson party is essentially running as Andrew Jackson. This time, as his running mate, he's going to choose this man, John Tyler, who's just an aristocrat from Virginia. Not super exciting. He used to be a Democrat, but he got in a fight with Jackson, so he left the Democratic Party to join the Whigs. And he's going to end up coming up with probably the greatest and most easy-to-remember campaign slogan of all time. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. If you'll think back to the War of 1812, William Henry Harrison was the hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe, where he defeated Tecumseh and kind of got famous. And of course, you have your current sitting president, Martin Van Buren, who was hand-selected by Jackson to become president. Just saying, here's a trend. If you ever want to get into politics, don't go after someone who is extremely popular. Martin Van Buren was the immediate successor to the absurdly popular Jackson. He wasn't Jackson, so nobody liked him. Of course, he did inherit a economic crisis, and that didn't help things. But he doesn't have a whole lot going for him, and he's going to end up losing this election to William Henry Harrison. Harrison gets a total of 234 electoral votes as opposed to Van Buren's 60. So let's talk a little bit about the election of William Henry Harrison, or rather, his term as presidency. You may not have ever heard of him. That's because he was only president for 28 days. When it came time for his inauguration, he's going to go out and give a 4-hour-long speech on the grounds of the Capitol in a blizzard. Not only is he in a blizzard, he's not wearing a coat because he thinks that's a sign of weakness, and he's a rough and tough fellow. So he's going to give his speech. He's going to go home. He's going to contract pneumonia, lie in bed for 28 days, and die. Heck of a presidency right there. After his death, kind of nobody knew what to do. See, there was no written-in provision in the Constitution for what to do in the event of the death of a president. It says the vice president will assume the power of the president. But the idea behind that was that they would temporarily be president while a special election was held. But it wasn't spelled out. Now, our Vice President John Tyler is friends with one of the members of the Supreme Court. So he's going to send a messenger to this Supreme Court justice who's his friend. Says, hey, come to the White House, bring a Bible, and we're going to swear me in as president. And so that's exactly what happens. But it doesn't work out for him too well, because he's a man without a party. He got kicked out of the Democratic Party. He wasn't really a member of the Whig, except by default. So they didn't want to claim him either. And because of this kind of underhanded way that that he took the presidency, his entire cabinet, with the exception of Daniel Webster, is going to resign. So his entire body of advisors, except for one, is going to say, peace, I'm out, good luck, ain't my problem anymore. That sets him out on a bad start. Other things that's going to happen to him is he's going to decide to raise the tariff rate to 32%. If you'll remember, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. That really makes the Southerners displeased. If you'll remember, the Southerners like to buy their goods from Europe, which means taxes went up on their goods. The other thing he really, really wants to do is annex Texas. However, he cannot get it to pass Congress. John Tyler's never able to annex Texas. But we still remember him. That's who Tyler, up at the north of us, is named after. That's why Tyler has John Tyler High School, is in honor of the president who tried to get Texas. So moving past the presidency of Tyler, we move into the election of 1844, where we have Henry Clay and James K. Polk. Now, at this point, this is I think the third time Henry Clay has run for president. He's been known as the Great Compromiser. He looks like a really favorable candidate and a good choice for the Whig Party. Whereas the Democrats are going to nominate James K. Polk. Nobody knows who James K. Polk is. He's what we call a dark horse candidate, but he's going to end up winning. Largely because people are voting for not a Whig. The last Whig wasn't very good, so let's try somebody else. So, like I said, in 1844, he ran a dark horse campaign. He also became known as Little Hickory, because he pulled a lot on his heritage as a Jacksonian Democrat. He's going to adopt a lot of the same policies as Jackson, and he's going to really just resonate with people like that. Now, a lot of people forget about Polk, but a lot of people also consider him to be one of the most successful presidents we've had in history. And I say that people say that because he came in and said he was going to do three things. He was going to annex Texas. He was going to lower the tariff, and he was going to take Oregon from Britain, because there was a border dispute in Oregon at this time. You can see right here, there's this whole disputed area, if you can see it, my cursor circling it. It's all disputed between U.S. and Canada, or between U.S. and Britain. He's going to end up doing these three things. He's going to end up annexing Texas. He's going to lower his tariff to 25%, and he's going to end up claiming Oregon along the 49th parallel. The U.S. was really hoping to take it all the way up here to 5440, but that didn't happen. We ended up establishing our northern border right here at 49 degrees of latitude. But it's very successful, and he does all of this in his first 4 years as president. And he's wildly popular for doing these things, and people are asking him to run again. He says, yeah, no, I'm done. I did my 3 things. I'm going home. I'm tired. And he does exactly that. Not worried about that. And that brings us into the election of 1848. And we're going to have a massive election on this time. First one we're going to have is the Democrats are going to nominate General Lewis Cass. We have a tendency to like generals at this point in time, so he's a good choice. And his whole idea is he wants to make the issue of slavery an issue of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is let the people vote, let the people choose. The Whigs are going to nominate Zachary Taylor, who was the hero of the Battle of Buena Vista. He was the hero of the greatest battle of the Mexican-American War. So that's his whole platform. They ask him a question, he goes, "I'm the hero of Buena Vista." And then this third party called the Free Soilers are going to nominate Martin Van Buren again. He was Jackson's vice president. He was president in 1836, but not very successful. It looks like it's probably going to be a battle between Van Buren and Cass, because they both have opinions on slavery. But who do we end up electing? Zachary Taylor, because he took no sides on an issue. He just said, "I'm the hero," and that's all you need to know. And he wins big. Now, a couple years into Zachary Taylor's term, he is going to die. We say he had a heart attack. It's possible he was poisoned. His body was exhumed and autopsied, and they said there were trace levels of arsenic, but they also say there was probably a little bit of arsenic in everything in those days, so we don't know. But when he dies, his vice president, Millard Fillmore, takes the presidency. And about this time, we have the Compromise of 1850 occur, where these 3 giants of the Senate, Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, and Douglas, are going to speak in behalf of the compromise. And it's got 5 aspects. First of all, it says, California will come in as a free state. Okay. They're okay with that. There's no established slave trade in California. You'd have to bring it all. It's not well suited to plantations. So they say, all right, California can come in as a free state. Utah and New Mexico, they said, we'll let them come in with popular sovereignty. We'll let them vote. They're pretty confident that the Mormons in Ohio are going to vote no to slavery, and confident that the people in New Mexico are going to vote yes on slavery. We keep the balance. Also, as part of this, Texas is going to lose its disputed land and end up with our modern-day borders, and get paid $10 million for that. That $10 million will go on to pay off the debt that the state of Texas has. And then the next part is talking about Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. Slavery would be allowed in D.C. You could bring your slaves into D.C. However, slave trade was illegal in D.C. You could not buy or sell slaves inside of Washington, D.C. because it kind of would look really bad. At this point, we're the only major nation in the world that hasn't banned slavery. And we didn't want foreign diplomats coming in and seeing a slave auction the second they got off the ship. We were embarrassed by slavery, and rightfully so. And then the last thing was it had a harsh fugitive slave law, which meant if runaway slaves were caught, it was bad. Was this the greatest thing ever? No, what would have been great is completely banning slavery. However, this was as good as we were going to get in 1850. We were far too divided to choose something gentler than that. Pardon me. We are going to see the fall of the Whig Party in the election of 1852. You see, the Whigs have failed to come down on one side or the other of the slavery. In fact, they split in half. You have the Cotton Whigs, which are mostly your Southern Whigs, who are for slavery, and then you have your conscious Whigs, who are compelled to listen to their conscience. They listen to their voice, their inner voice that tells them what's right and wrong. And they cannot vote for slavery. This leaves them as a party divided. In 1852, the Democrats are going to nominate Franklin Pierce, who's another dark horse candidate who nobody knows anything about, but he is the not Whig option. The Whigs are going to then nominate Winfield Scott, who is another general who fought in the Mexican-American War. However, he's not this pretty spiffy general he once was. At this point, he's an old man. He's 300 pounds. He does not look charismatic. He's not a great choice. And the Democrats are going to win in a landslide. Between the Whigs being divided and having an unpopular candidate, this is the end of the Whig Party. We won't ever see them again. The Pierce administration does a few things. It's a very expansionist administration. With the first major thing they're doing is what we call the Gadsden Purchase. They're going to purchase this little strip of land right here from Mexico. What's so important about this strip of land? It is below the southernmost peaks of the Rocky Mountains, and it has a pass inside of it that is perfect for a transcontinental railroad from Texas to California. We paid $10 million for this spot. Now, for some perspective, we paid $15 million for the entire Louisiana Purchase not that long ago. So we spent a chunk of change on that, but it was worth it economically. The other thing Pierce did is he continually tried to get Congress to let him go to war with Cuba and Canada to take them into being part of the U.S. Of course, Congress repeatedly said, no, we're not going to war. Shut up. Get over it. And then the last... the last thing he did was the Kansas-Nebraska Act. It was pushed through Congress by Stephen Douglas, and it was based on the principle of popular sovereignty. And it's going to nullify or cancel the Compromise of 1820 and the Compromise of 1850. And leads to what we call Bleeding Kansas. See, here's the trouble with Kansas, and it's still a problem today. You can move into Kansas, register to vote, and vote in their election on the same day. Most other states have a 30-day, 60-day residency requirement, not Kansas. So, when the election came to vote on whether or not Kansas would be a free state or a slave state, people from all over the U.S. packed up their families and moved to Kansas. They set up a tent, they rented a room, and registered to vote. You got slave owners, you got free soilers. They're all charging in. And because of all these extra people, the vote is actually so close that both sides declare that they have won. And they set up two governments. The Shawnee government, which is the slave government, and the Topeka government, which is the free soil government. And so we've got opposing governments at this point. Kansas is split in half. Another thing that happens a little bit after the election in 1856 is what we call the Potawatomi Massacre. This is led by this was led by a Reverend John Brown. He was part of a kind of an extremist cult, and he felt he was led by God to abolish slavery in the whole world by whatever means necessary. So he and his fanatics are going to go into this town of Potawatomi and actually massacre all of the slave owners in that town. That's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. That's going to enrage people against the abolitionists, the Free Soilers. And in 1857, they're going to adopt the Lee-Compton Constitution, which makes Kansas into a full slave state. And that's where we're gonna stop for today. Make sure you complete the attached assignment, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.